When an empath takes in the narcissist's darkness and lives to tell the tale, Alan Watts would say they don't merely mend, they molt. The person who once absorbed every projection becomes unreachable. The soul that carried everyone's discarded shadows grows a kind of immunity to manipulation. Most startling of all, their simple presence begins to make other people face the very darkness they've been trying to outsource. Picture it. You've been carrying their rage, their shame, their hollow ache until your reflection starts to look like a stranger. You became the receptacle for pain they refused to process, and they walked away spotless, leaving you to sift through the debris of an inner world that wasn't even yours. Then something shifts, not with fireworks or revenge, but with a still, fearsome clarity. You stop explaining yourself to people who never had any intention of listening. You stop absorbing feelings that never arose from your own life. Most devastatingly to the manipulator, you become entirely unavailable for their staged crises. Watts might not have used the clinical word, but he would call this the birth of genuine sovereignty. The moment you stop being an object in someone else's game and remember you're the one moving. What emerges from that turning point is not the same person who stumbled into the narcissist's web. It's a new pattern of being that, in Watts's language, sees through the trick of separateness and stops playing along. And here's what most people miss. The metamorphosis isn't primarily earned in a therapist's office or by stacking self-help slogans. It ripens in what Watts spoke of as a night sea crossing of the soul, a plunge into psychic underworld so total that only what is real can survive. The empath who endures that descent becomes something rarely named aloud, a traveler of the undercurrents, a shadow walker. Someone who has stared into the abyss of human confusion and returned with a flame that doesn't flicker in the wind. Watts often reminded us that passions and fears rule us until we pass straight through them. You don't transcend what you've never entered. The empath-narcissist bond is this furnace, a crucible that either consumes you or tempers you into something no one expects. This isn't merely recovery, it's evolution, a qualitative upgrade in consciousness that Watts believed becomes possible when you stop trying to dominate life and start seeing what you are. Beneath the struggle, the narcissist, so hungry to devour your light, accidentally becomes the catalyst for your deepest transfiguration. They think they're dismantling you. Without meaning to, they become the heat that forges you. Watts loved to explore types of temperament and patterns of mind, and he would have noticed something about highly sensitive people. They can turn into shadow containers, unconsciously trained to hold the psychic garbage others won't face. Healthy people do not need to torment others. The tormented tend to spread torment, but empaths often enact a third path. They absorb the torment and refuse to pass it on. This produces a trance of participation, a mystic tangle where the empath can't easily tell the difference between their own feeling and what they have absorbed. The narcissist exploits this entanglement with surgical precision, using the empath's attunement as a landfill for unowned emotions. Here is where Watts's perspective becomes crucial. He knew that some problems aren't solved in the usual sense. You outgrow them by seeing through the premises that make them problems. The empath-narcissist spiral forces that kind of outgrowing in the most unforgiving way. It's evolution via trial, development through crisis. The narcissist embodies the denied shadow, the bundle of qualities they refuse to admit. The empath becomes the storage unit for that banished material, and in carrying it, they begin to understand darkness with a literacy that permanently changes the way reality is read. Consciousness evolves through friction. Very little deepening happens in a padded room. The empath doesn't just watch shadow play from the balcony. They haul it on their back until a new capacity appears. Shadow literacy, the ability to read the weather of human darkness as if it were one's native tongue. If you felt like you were lugging someone else's emotional baggage, you already know the texture. Watts spoke of the dark night as a stripping away of grasping, and for empaths inside narcissistic theaters, this becomes immersion. You don't witness darkness, you're submerged in it. The projections don't only sting, they rewrite your story. Their shame mutates into your self-doubt. Their rage becomes your anxiety. Their void begins to echo as your depression. You drink their psychological toxins until the edges of your own identity blur. It's a kind of poisoning, and there is no awakening without the taste of it. But for empaths, the pain is not strictly personal, it's ancestral. You're metabolizing residue that belongs to generations of unexamined hurt. The narcissist drags you into a blackening phase of inner alchemy where every structure melts down. Yet hidden in that disorder is an order you can't see while you're drowning. The psyche has an immune system. When foreign material is shoved into the temple of who you are, something deep within starts crafting antibodies, subtle recognitions that begin to reject manipulation at the threshold. That is why the empath's transformation is so complete. You don't merely learn about manipulation with your head. Your whole nervous system develops a visceral no to psychic pollution. The one who survives has made more darkness conscious than most encounter in a lifetime. You become a wounded healer in an uncommon sense. Wounded by borrowed shadow, healed by illuminating it. The fiercest conflicts, once faced through to the end, leave behind a calm that's hard to shake. And empaths know the peculiar brutality of this passage because their identity was built around being helpful, understanding, ceaselessly available. The breaking isn't operatic, it's quiet and petrifying. One morning you wake and the mirror carries no recognition. Your empathy feels numb, your hope tastes poisoned, the faculty to trust lies in shards. Accepting yourself seems like the most frightening act of all, especially when your sense of self feels buried beneath years of other people's residue. Everything that looks solid dissolves, condemnation doesn't liberate, and yet acceptance appears out of reach when you can't locate the acceptor. Watts would say, "You are not what happened, you're what you choose to be now." But that choice blooms only after the counterfeit self dies. The identity built on appeasing others, on smoothing conflict, on overgiving, must fall apart. Here the narcissist, in all their relentless attack on your center, unwittingly becomes the dismantler of your false front. They perform a rough spiritual surgery that forces awakening in ways decades of tidy work might never accomplish. The mind's pendulum swings through absurdity before it discovers sense. The narcissist pushes you so far into nonsense that you locate your own rhythm again. In the deep dark, something older than your story wakes. Watts called it by many names. The self behind the self. The awareness that isn't an object. The wholeness that precedes the mask. The empath discovers they are not their trauma, not the feelings they absorbed, not the reflex to rescue. They are something vaster. Becoming truly oneself, Watts insisted, is the privilege of a lifetime. And for most, it's a phrase on a poster. The empath who has survived doesn't repeat the line. They live the reality down to the bones because everything false has been burned away. Watts loved alchemy as metaphor, the work against habit that results in a new substance. The empath's passage is precisely that opus contra naturam. What emerges is the integrated empath, sensitivity intact, yet encircled by boundaries that cannot be breached. A psyche that has discovered what the old sages hinted at, a function that transmutes opposites, creating something new out of the quarrel between light and dark, victim and victor, wound and wisdom. The narcissist remains largely asleep, while the empath wakes up with luminous precision. The result is psychological sovereignty, the shadow immunity that lets you see projections before they reach you. It's like learning night vision after years in pitch black. Tactics that once unmade you slide away like rain on glass. Not because you hardened, but because you understood. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it runs your life and you christen it fate. The transformed empath has brought manipulation into the light, and light strips it of power. You can spot the strings before the puppet show even sets up its stage, and then the transformation does something even subtler. Your presence interrupts manipulation without any speech. Watts spoke of a constellation effect, the way one person's clarity retunes a room. The purpose of a human existence, he said in many ways, is to kindle light in the darkness of mere being. The evolved empath becomes that light, not the naive glow that gets consumed, but the fierce beam that exposes what hides. If you've reached the point where manipulations feel obvious and ineffective, you know the flavor. The matrix lines show up in daylight. Watts cataloged many archetypal stances, but there is one that's born only through trial by fire, the shadow walker, the one who has walked in hell and returned with forbidden knowledge. This figure overlaps with the wounded healer, yet differs in one essential way. Instead of healing through unhealed wounds, they heal through wholeness. They've learned what most avoid: how to navigate the darkest waters without swallowing the sea. Your existence becomes Exhibit A for sovereignty. You threaten the unspoken contracts that keep people. If these reflections are offering you a moment of clarity or calm, I warmly invite you to support Listening Mind by subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Each gesture of support helps us continue creating meaningful content and allows this community of thoughtful listeners to grow. Knotted in dysfunction because you won't play your former part in the drama. People will do almost anything to avoid meeting their own soul. That's why your presence disturbs after you've changed. You've stepped out of the projection matrix, and you won't hold anyone's mirror for them anymore. The individual has always had to resist being swallowed by the tribe. The shadow walker wins that contest. You develop tribal immunity, the ability to hold your frequency even inside a crowd asleep at the wheel. The price is a certain loneliness. Watts called it the solitude of one who has seen through the game. Loneliness doesn't come from the absence of people. It comes from not being able to speak what matters and be met. Yet this solitude is not empty. It's brimming with an intimacy with the real self that most never touch. Being alone with what you truly are is better than being surrounded by those who only address their fantasy of you. To be normal in the banal sense is an unworthy goal. The shadow walker has no appetite for normal. They prefer real. At a certain stage, highly individuated people become mirrors of consciousness. Your very being starts reflecting truth instead of rehearsing the pleasing image you once offered. This sets off projection withdrawal. When others can no longer stick their shadow onto you, they must at last confront it. Unconscious people hate this on contact, which explains why your shift may provoke accusations that you're cold, changed, or unhinged. Everything that irritates us about others can become a doorway to self-understanding, but most would rather keep scratching the itch. Meanwhile, others are drawn to you like moths to a flame. They sense an electricity, a presence that is both inviting and a little dangerous, because it implies they might have to change. This is the numinous shine, the glimmer of archetypal energy made human. If people started treating you differently after you changed, it's because your energy recalibrated and everyone felt the new gravity. The most profound ripple, though, flows toward other empaths still entangled with narcissists. Your reality becomes their proof. Escape is possible. Transfiguration is real. The prison's bars were never as solid as they seem. Watts saw a paradox at the center of growth. Genuine power is not power over. It's power so inwardly settled that no one can commandeer you. The transformed empath is powerfully non-controllable, precisely because they have no urge to control. They found the treasure that is hard to attain, undisturbed self-possession. You are what you do, not the promise you make about tomorrow. For the integrated empath, boundaries are not threats or speeches, they're facts. You don't announce the line, you live the line. This bursts a paradoxical magnetism. The more self-contained you are, the more others want to be near you. The less you chase approval, the more it arrives unsolicited. The less you offer yourself as an emotional wastebasket, the more respect appears. Where love reigns, domination vanishes, and where domination rules, love can't breathe. The transformed empath moves beyond the will to power through the discipline of love, starting with love of one's own life. This is not narcissism, it's appropriate self-regard. the foundation of any healthy exchange. You can't pour what you don't have, and the evolved empath has distilled something rare, unshakable worth. Self-acceptance in this light is not a cozy slogan, but a moral pivot. The empath who has been through narcissistic storms is driven toward radical acceptance, the kind that's tempered in fire. The twist is beautiful. By refusing to be a dumping ground, you become available for intimacy in a way you never were before. By denying manipulation space to live, you open space for love to live. A bright life will still carry streaks of darkness, and happiness would lose its meaning without them. The integrated empath understands this as lived balance. You can hold space for another's night without letting it settle inside your chest. You become a container in the best sense, conscious, bounded, clear, not a sponge that soaks up every spill. Some are called to a guardian function, protecting others from predators simply by modeling a boundary no one can breach. Asking the right question is half the solution. Your boundaries become that question, and people who meet you must ask themselves why they expected you to carry what was theirs. You become a boundary beacon, proof that sovereignty is possible. Other empaths see you and begin to believe in their own exit. This guardian function doesn't require sermons. It works through resonance. Your level of clarity pulls on the clarity of those nearby. You don't need to do anything heroic. You just need to remain what you are, without collapsing. Encounters become alchemical. If there is a reaction, both sides are transformed. But now your reactions are chosen, not compelled. You decide which chemical equations to enter based on what nourishes your life, not on what fills someone else's emptiness. Selectivity isn't cruelty, it's consciousness. Indiscriminate giving is often only an addiction to being needed. Many empaths spend long seasons doing research, decades of rehearsing absorption and mistaking it for love. Graduation day is the moment you stop playing the role and start living. You become a guardian not by preaching, but by embodiment. The invention of what's truly new, Watts said again and again, is not achieved by strain, but by a playful inner necessity. Your presence itself opens new possibilities for others because it proves that authenticity can survive contact with this world. There is a trap here, one Watts would flag with a smile, the integration trap. After awakening, some swing from porous to stone. They confuse armor with strength, isolation with safety. True integration is the union of opposites. Keep your empathy and your edges, your openness and your discernment, your compassion and your standards. The aim is not to stop feeling, it is to feel on purpose. Emotion, when clearly seen, stops being suffering. The integrated empath feels fully and is consumed by nothing. You can witness another's pain without swallowing it, offer help without forfeiting yourself, love fiercely without erasing your outline. This balance is delicate and demands vigilance. Old patterns of absorption and codependence will tap at the window, especially during stress. But once you've tasted freedom, servitude doesn't fit. The wiring has changed at a level too deep to undo. Watts trusted that individual change becomes cultural change. The individual is the only reality you can work with directly. Abstractions seduce us into error. The transformed empath radiates ripples. Your freedom grants silent permission for others to seek theirs. Without speeches, people feel the difference around you and begin to question the way they've been living. You are proof that emotional abuse doesn't have to be a life sentence, that empathy does not require self-erasure, that softness can live with steel. Some will try to pull you back with guilt, tricks, or emergencies that always seem to land at your feet. The crab bucket exists at every level of life. Anything that crawls toward daylight makes the rest anxious. But you've grown immune to those tactics. You see them for what they are. Trapped energy looking for a mule, not genuine pleas. If you recognize your own passage in all this, you already know. Your healing is your superpower. The empath who absorbs the narcissist's darkness and survives doesn't simply recover. They evolve into a form of consciousness Watts gestured toward, but that word's only outline. You become living evidence that the psyche is tougher than the worst storms, that light emerges out of the deepest night, that real power doesn't come from steering other people, but from mastering your own helm. The narcissists thought they were dimming your flame. In truth, they helped temper it into something weatherproof. They thought they were breaking your kindness. They refined it into conscious compassion that cannot be harvested. Your changed life becomes a lighthouse for empaths still adrift, signaling that freedom is not only possible, it becomes inevitable once you understand the rules and stop agreeing to play the old game. Look outward and you dream, look inward and you wake. The ordeal drove you inward until you touched the part of you that cannot be bruised. That core was there from the start. The narcissist merely burned away what was never truly you. If you want to explore how to tell the difference between your authentic signal and the noise you've absorbed from others, I've recorded a companion piece on 8 signs you don't belong to the herd, where I lean further into Watts's insights about the few who perceive reality differently from the sleeping crowd. Your sensitivity was never the flaw, it was the gift waiting for integration. Thank you for walking this road of transformation with me. I'll meet you at the next level of awareness. Thank you sincerely for sharing your time with Listening Mind. Your presence here means more than you can imagine. If today's video has brought you value, a subscription and a like are a wonderful way to help us continue on this journey of reflection and empathy together. From the heart, thank you for being part of this space.